It's Organ Donor Enrollment Day. Have you registered?
I think that's really what's important, is to make sure that we're conscious of the choice we can make.
To tell you why this small step can have a big impact, your host, New York State Senator David Carlucci.
Hi, I'm Senator David Carlucci, and I represent parts of Rockland and Westchester counties in the New York State Senate. And I want to thank Dana Levenberg, the town supervisor of Ossining, and Live On New York, and everyone involved to get this Zoomathon going, to promote organ donation, to build awareness, and make sure that we help as many people as possible through this process. So I'm so excited because I have with me here two all-stars when it comes to organ donation that have helped so much in changing policy and changing the hearts and minds of people in New York State and around the country. And that's Lauren and Jeanne Shields. And they're with me today. And Lauren is who Lauren's Law is named after, who helped get that legislation passed a few years back that has made a big difference here in New York and has been an example for other states to follow. So Lauren and Jeanne, thanks so much for joining me today and talking about originally how you guys got involved and what happened that led to the first transplant that you received.
So the first transplant was the heart transplant in 2009, which had really come out of nowhere. I had been a perfectly healthy child, never really got sick, and Mom hardly even ever had Tylenol. Because me and my brother, we just never got sick. And all of a sudden, I kind of started feeling very tired all the time, out of breath going upstairs, not wanting to participate in gym class, not really eating as much either. And, you know, we would have never had guessed that I was in the midst of heart failure, but that's what had happened. And so I went to the hospital and they did an ultrasound and found out that my heart was enlarged and I had fluid all in my rib cage. My heart was functioning at 14% at that time, and immediately they admitted me into the hospital and started, medications and steroids to try and help the heart, which seemed to have worked for a little bit, but unfortunately my other systems, started to shut down and I was getting sicker, and they had told me that a heart transplant was the only thing that was going to help me. And at that point, I was probably like 8, and I didn't even really know what a heart transplant was. But, after a long conversation with the doctors and Mom, they explained it to me, and I knew that that was what I had to do in order to get better and to feel better. So I just had to do it. And, eventually I just got too sick that they needed to place me on life support. So I was on full life support for 15 days. They put me on the transplant wait list. I waited about a month and a half, which really isn't that long. But, I was lucky to only wait a month and a half because in New York, people wait years. They sometimes months and years for their organs. And I was very lucky. So on March 19th, 2009, I received my heart transplant that saved my life.
Wow, and this is exactly why we work together, because we know that right now, just in the New York State area, you have over 10,000 people waiting for a life-saving organ transplant, and one person dies every 18 hours waiting. And we know in our conversations that we've talked about that we said, hey, we can do more. We know we can change policy in New York and turn these numbers around. And maybe you can talk briefly about how we met.
I started speaking at naturalization ceremonies, and I would share my story there about my heart transplant and really encourage the new citizens to sign up to become organ donors and how important it was, how important organ donation is, and how they have the opportunity to save someone's life. And you were always at everyone, and you spoke as well. And so I remember one time after one of the ceremonies, you were there, and I decided to go up and talk to you and introduce myself. And I remember asking you, what I could do to help the numbers in New York and help increase the number of people who were enrolled. And you said that you could actually use my help and that we could work together. And that's kind of where it all began. And I distinctly remember you asking for my phone number, and you said that, we would get in touch, and, your people would call, like my mom, and leaving thinking that you were never going to call. Like, why would you need my help? Like, that I was just a kid, and like, you wouldn't need my help. But you did call. So that was kind of how everything started, and, about the law, and I was very interested in.
And that was some time ago, because I remember we started working on this in 2011. So it's 9 years ago. And I remember at the time I was new to the Senate. And this is something that I'd thought about organ donation, and knew about the rates being so low, and thought that I had some common sense ideas of what we could do. And remember how frustrating that was, because 9 years ago, we would talk to people and they'd be very confused and very skeptical about organ donation. And that wasn't that long ago. And I remember us introducing Lauren's Law, and the bill that we finally got passed. And what that does is, when you're at the Department of Motor Vehicles and you're asked the question, or when you're applying for a license or a permit, and it asks you, would you like to be an organ donor? Yes, or skip the question. So we're basically doing the mandated choice. But to get there, it took us a few years to finally pass that legislation. And we met opposition from different people and different groups. And what I always found was it was a lot of, oh, well, it's not me, it's this other person or group or religion that it has an opposition to what we're trying to do. But as we pushed and we pushed, we found, and as we answered questions, that a lot of that skepticism disappeared. And I think that's why the most important thing, and like we often talked about, was even though that bill didn't pass immediately, it did finally get passed, but just talking about it and talking about your story and your experience, I think really changed a lot of people's opinions on what organ donation is and why it's so important. So now fast forward, and recently you received a kidney transplant. And why don't you please tell us about that, how that happened? And
so after my heart transplant, I lived, 11 really healthy years with my new heart. And I was so lucky to be able to get back to living life and going to college and, doing all the things that a normal kid would do. But unfortunately, last August, I was diagnosed with kidney disease. And by the time I went to the doctor, they had told me that it was already stage 3, which isn't that bad. But, they were trying at that point to either keep it where it was and make sure it didn't get worse, because I had the scarring on my kidneys could not be improved. They couldn't reverse the damage that had already been done. And what had happened was the medication I was taking for my heart, the anti-rejection meds, which I needed, had affected my kidneys negatively. And this doesn't happen with everyone. The medication affects everyone differently. In my case, it just happened that my kidneys decided to stop working at Columbia Presbyterian by a nephrologist, and I was seeing her like every 3 months, and eventually, it got worse, and like very, very slowly. It was such a slow decline. My blood pressure was always so high. That also affects the kidneys negatively. And so I remember in May, there had just been a few couple days that I was feeling really, really bad, like worse than normal, and I wasn't eating, and I was like on the couch the whole weekend, sleeping all day, and my mom definitely knew that there was something wrong. So we decided to go to the emergency room at Columbia, and what they found, they did a blood test, and my kidney numbers were just all over the place. And within 24 hours, they said, okay, we need to start dialysis right away. They did an emergency procedure to place the dialysis port. And before I knew it, I woke up from the procedure and I was having my first dialysis session. And it was, before the dialysis, when we were being followed by the nephrologist, she said, this is probably heading in the direction where you would need a kidney transplant. And so I said, okay. And Mom was like, we should get it started now before you get to the point where you need dialysis. And so she did. You started, being tested to see if she could be a match for me. And it just so happened that I just got too sick and I needed the dialysis. So they did that, and I went on dialysis on May 7th. And from there, I spent, I was having treatment 3 times a week, and then eventually went to 4 times a week for 4 hours because I needed more dialysis. Right. And they sent me home, and I was doing outpatient dialysis for a while. But, it's so hard to figure out how much dialysis you need. There's so many different factors. And for me, I needed to go back into the hospital in June, and they had to do a more aggressive dialysis. That was kind of when the wheels started turning more to get Mom, ready to find out if she could be a match for me.
The minute we knew that was potentially where we were heading, I started the process. Transplant centers, in any hospital that has a transplant center, they all have systems set up for anyone who's considering being a live donor. So the process was really easy for me, insofar as I just went on the website and started answering some questions. Within a very short period of time, I was asked to come into the hospital to have a blood test done, and they made sure that blood type we were a match. But that's not the end. There's so many tests that need to be done to make sure you're healthy enough to do the procedure. And so as a parent, I couldn't do those tests fast enough. Right. Every time I would call to make an appointment, to have a test done, I would say, this is why I'm having the test done. My daughter is in need of this kidney transplant. And, so many of the places that I called for appointments were so helpful to kind of speed that process along. But I wasn't scared at all. This was something I was so happy to be able to finally be in a position where I could help Lauren, and knew that this was going to make her better. There was nothing worse than watching her go through those dialysis treatments.
Right.
It's such a horrible thing to watch anyone go through. But I remember that first day I sent her through the doors of the dialysis clinic. With COVID, I wasn't allowed to be in with her, and I kind of just sent her through the doors, and it was such a horrible feeling as a parent. And so doing the donation for me, donating my kidney to Lauren was literally like a no-brainer. And I was so excited and pleased to have gone through it for her.
Wow. And so it happened pretty recently. I mean, it seems like just the other day.
Yeah, the transplant happened on July 21st. I can't even tell you that, like she said that she was so excited. She woke up like 4 o'clock that morning, like ready to go. And I was very nervous for the surgery, actually.
Sure.
Yeah, she was so excited, but I was nervous for her and nervous for me. But as soon as I woke up from the surgery, it was probably like a 7-hour surgery. I woke up in the OR, and they were, transferring me from the table to the bed, and I felt better already. And it's like I didn't even realize how sick I was before. And that's what people kept telling me is, you're going to feel so much better. I didn't even realize how sick I actually was until I woke up and felt better. Already.
Wow. Lauren, you said you started to feel better right away. What was it like the following days and weeks?
They had me up and walking 2 days after the surgery, which was unbelievable, so different than the heart transplant. The recovery process is so two completely different like processes, and
Sure.
to be up and walking, 2 days after the surgery was just mind blowing for me. Considering I had spent, after waking up from the heart transplant, I spent, months in bed, not being able to walk, not being able to get up, and it was just two totally different experiences.
Right.
I did spend probably like 3 weeks, I think, like 2 weeks in the hospital after the transplant. They were just difficulties with medication, figuring out, what medication would be right for me.
Recuperation time for me was a little bit different. It just took me a little bit longer. It's an abdominal surgery, so it just takes a little bit longer to get on your feet. But, we're back to boxing class already.
Wow.
Yeah, we were back last week, right?
First class back last week. I'm back to school. I'm doing everything online this semester, but I am happy to get back into that like rhythm of school and doing classes all day, and doing the homework and everything. So I'm happy to get back into a routine.
When we first met, you were talking about being a doctor, a cardiologist, and where now you're in college. And so what are you thinking now for the future?
So I was a biology major when I first went into college. Dominican College offers a new major. It's called health science major, and I decided to switch from bio to be a health science major. And the classes have been so great; they're so much more interesting to me. And I do like anatomy and physiology and medical terminology, and I have a health professions class where I learn about different fields in healthcare. So I've decided that I think I want to be now, which could change in a couple of years because it has changed. So maybe you could ask me again in like 2 years.
Yep.
To do cardiac ultrasounds.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So after I graduate, I'll go to sonography school for 2 years.
Okay.
And I'll learn how to be a sonographer and be trained in different fields, vascular, cardio, and we'll see where that goes.
It's amazing because the technology just keeps changing and seems to be getting better and better. And I think about how when you first had the transplant over 10 years ago, how the medicine and the technology has advanced from then. And hopefully that's something that will continue, to keep having these advancements. But that's what we've often talked about, that yes, we can have these technological breakthroughs and marvels in modern medicine. However, if we don't get people on board in recognizing how important this is, that we'll still have major complications and problems. And just some numbers that I have, that when we first started talking about Lauren's Law in New York, the average organ donor registry was way down. And that number had grown a little bit. The numbers I have here from 2013 to 2017 is we grew the organ donor registry from 21% to 31%. And then we also expanded and allowed for 16 and 17-year-olds to become organ donors. And we thought that was so important because the majority of people in New York were doing it at the DMV. So let's get them when we can, when they're going to get a driver's permit, driver's license. And now last year, Lauren's Law helped New York State set a record of 5.6 million people registering to become organ donors. So that's something that I know we're all really excited about, and we look forward to continuing to see those numbers grow. So with that, I just want to thank you both for joining us here today, and your story is just so powerful and really so important to share. And I know I'm hopeful many people will see this interview and it'll help them through some real, what can be real scary times for people. I mean, you guys are extremely brave.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator, for all you've done for the cause as well. You've been, really so helpful in the movement in New York. So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Senator Carlucci's interview with Lauren and Jeanne Shields. Today is Organ Donor Enrollment Day. a day dedicated to inspiring New Yorkers just like you to sign up as an organ donor. This decision could help save someone like Lauren, who we just met. To become an organ donor, please visit the link on your screen or visit Senator Carlucci's Facebook page.